Are foster parents really the bad guys? Today I thought I would do a more lighthearted and fun video discussing the different myths, misconceptions, and stereotypes surrounding foster care. And as I was looking into the different myths and stereotypes and misconceptions surrounding foster care, I realized that there are a whole heck of a lot of them. So I've decided to split this video into two parts. In this video, we will do part one, which will talk about the misconceptions and stereotypes about foster parents and foster parenting. And then if you stick around for part two, I will post that next week with the common misconceptions and stereotypes about children in foster care. So I'm splitting it into two videos, one regarding the foster parents, one regarding the children in foster care. If you want to stick around for part two, please consider liking this video, subscribing to my channel below, and hitting that post notification bell, setting the notifications to all so that you won't miss out when I post part two of this video about misconceptions and stereotypes surrounding foster care. Hi friends, I'm Anna Leonora, and together with my husband Jason, we are foster parents in real life. And here on my channel, From the Fosters, we do foster parenting life together and raise awareness for the foster care system. So if any of that interests you, please consider subscribing to my channel to join my growing cyber family here on YouTube. So the first myth I want to address is that foster parents have to be in a heterosexual marriage in order to become licensed foster parents. That's just simply not true. Of course, there are a lot of foster parents that are in heterosexual marriages, but you don't have to be married to be a foster parent. You can get licensed as a single person, and there are lots of stories on the news about single people fostering and adopting children from foster care. So you absolutely can be single. I give a lot of credit and a lot of props to people who are single and choose to become single foster parents, because it's really difficult, and having my husband as a support person has been the only thing that's gotten me through this, or one of the only things that's gotten me through this. So I give a lot of credit to single parents in general, but especially single foster parents. But you also can be in a homosexual relationship. You don't have to be straight to be a foster parent. You can be gay. And in fact, there are a lot of really amazing foster parents and adoptive parents who are homosexual couples, and that's not an issue with most departments of social services. I think there are a couple private agencies across the country that might be religion-based that maybe have rules against that, but if you go through your Department of Social Services, I don't think there's any state in the country that has any rules or laws about not being able to be a foster parent because you're homosexual. That's outdated. And homosexual couples make some of the best foster parents there are. So you don't have to be heterosexual, and you don't have to be married to be a foster parent. Another myth I want to address is that you can't work full-time and be a foster parent. So there's a myth out there and a stereotype that if you're a single foster parent, you have to be stay-at-home, or if you are a couple, that one of you is a stay-at-home parent. And that's just not true. In fact, many foster parents, both of the partners within the coupleship, or if you're single foster parent, do work full-time. And the state does provide daycare vouchers and daycare assistance if both people, or if you're single and just you, work full-time. So that's just not, it's just not true. It's just like regular parenting. I mean, people work, they've got jobs, they've got careers of their own, and you absolutely can work full-time. My husband and I both work full-time, and we are successful in our foster parenting. And most of the couples that we know, or even the single foster parents that we know, one or both or everyone work full-time in the partnership. So yes, foster parenting takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, but so does parenting in general. So you absolutely can work full-time and be a foster parent. Another myth about becoming a foster parent is that you must own your home. Also not true. You can rent your home. You can even actually live in an apartment. There's just rules about that you have to have a bedroom for the children, because unless they are under 1 or 2 years of age, depending on the state and the agency you're with, They can't share a room with you as an adult. So they do have to have their own room and their own space. But other than that, it doesn't matter whether you own the home, rent the home, townhome, apartment, even people in mobile homes and trailers get licensed. It really just depends on the amount of space you have, that you can prove that you have the room for the children to be able to have their own space within the home. It doesn't matter. You don't have to own your house to become a foster parent. The next myth is that you have to have biological children or already be a parent to be licensed as a foster parent. Again, not true. You can be licensed whether you have children or not. In fact, there are a lot of people who turn to foster parenting when they have had a struggle with infertility and have been unable to have biological children. There are a lot of people that turn to fostering after that sort of struggle. That's what happened with my husband and I. We battled infertility for several years. We did have a miscarriage after using fertility medication to get pregnant. We did several more medicated cycles after that and were never able to get pregnant again. And we turned to foster care. Now, I had always known I wanted to adopt. That was always part of my plan. I just hadn't considered foster care and fostering or adopting from foster care until after my struggle with infertility. And in fact, most of the people who went through the classes with us did not have children. Now, you also can have children to be foster parents, and there's arguments for pros and cons on both sides. If you've been a parent or have young children in the home, you have parenting experience, which is helpful. However, if you don't have children and you've never raised kids, then you can learn how to raise children of trauma because it is different. There are things you have to do differently. There are ways you have to discipline differently. There are ways you have to speak to them differently and treat them differently because of the experiences that they've been through. And so sometimes if you're coming at it having never been a parent, it can be helpful to learn parenting the way you need to parent children of trauma instead of having to break habits of parenting biological children. But if you've had biological children, you've had parenting experience in general. So it really doesn't matter whether you have biological children or not. You can be licensed as a foster parent either way. There are pros and cons to having biological children in the home versus not having biological children in the home as foster parents. It's whatever your family situation is. If you want to be a foster parent and you think you can't because you don't have kids, don't let that hold you back. Or if you think you can't because you do have kids, don't let it hold you back. There's pros and cons to having and not having kids, but you can be licensed as a foster parent either way. There's another misconception that you cannot be too old or too young to be a foster parent. There is no age cap on being a foster parent. And in fact, a lot of foster parents are people who have already had their children who are grown and now they've got grandchildren and they want to help more children, or they've just retired and have more time and they want to be able to give back. So there are a lot of people who are older who turn to fostering, but you also can be relatively young to be a foster parent. I think the general rule across most states in the country is that you have to be minimum 21 years of age. I have not heard of anything younger than 21 years of age. I have heard in some cases you need to be at least 25 to adopt, but the typical age in most states is 21. So you can be as young as 21. There is no age cap. They do want to make sure that you have the energy, the time, the ability to be able to care for children. So while there's no age cap, they do have you do a health physical with your doctor, but plenty of older people turn to fostering and make wonderful foster parents. So you have to be minimum 21 years of age. There's no age cap. Another myth about foster parenting is that if you're a foster parent, you cannot say no to placements. Again, that is just absolutely not correct. As a foster parent, you are actually expected to be able to identify for your agency what your areas of strength are, what your age group is, if you have specific genders that you're looking at. There are certain situations where, you know, maybe a single female foster parent would feel uncomfortable having teenage boys in her home, or a single male foster parent might feel uncomfortable having teenage girls in his home. There are people who have young biological children at home that would like only young children so that they can be kind of in the same age group as their biological children. So you absolutely can have preferences, and you are expected to act within your preferences. They will also have you go through and identify what behaviors or medical needs you think that you would be comfortable working with, and which ones you would not be comfortable working with. And just because you've identified those with your agency doesn't mean you won't get calls for that. So you may still get calls for things that are outside of your comfort zone, and they expect you to say no if it's something you don't think you can handle. So you absolutely can say no. In fact, my husband and I have had to say no, unfortunately, to a lot of placements while we have our current placement. We are licensed for 3 children, and someday we really do want sibling sets. We would love to have more children in the home. Right now, the child that we have at this time, while he does really well with other kids at daycare and playing, his therapist believes that it might be best for him to be the only child in the home, just for now, while he's kind of working through and healing through some of the things that he's working through. So for the time being, we have had to say no to other placements just for the sake of the placement that we currently have. And of course, depending on where that case goes, what happens with that, what that timeline looks like, who knows what our next placement will look like. We are licensed for 3. We would like to have multiple in the future, but in the meantime, we have had to turn placements down, not because there was anything wrong with the placements, but because we have one currently in our home that we are trying to do our best for right now. So you do have to look at what your preferences are, what you're comfortable with, what the children who are already in your home can handle. And they do expect you to say no. It's hard. You never want to say no to a child in need. As a foster parent, that's what we're here for, is we're here for children in need. And it's really hard, and I've felt very sad to have to say no to placements, but I know that it was what was in the best interest of my family and our current placement. And you just have to do what works for you and know that the universe will work things out for those children. So you don't have to say yes to every placement. In fact, you're probably going to say no more often potentially than you say yes, depending on what the need is in your county. The need is really, really great in my county, and I am directly through the county, so we tend to get more phone calls than people with private agencies, and we have had to say no more times than we've said yes. And it's not because there was anything wrong with the children they were calling us for. It was because we have a child in our home that we are trying to protect and do what's best for him at the advice of the care team and his therapist, and what we've learned about him, and giving him time to heal and adjust in this crazy system. So you absolutely can say no to placements. You will say no as a foster parent, and it's really hard, but it's a myth that you're not allowed to say no and that you have to take every call that you get. Another myth about foster parenting that I have addressed before in some of my previous videos is that people become foster parents for the money. And that is just so wrong. Yes, you get a stipend, a monthly stipend per child, depending on their age, depending on your state, county, agency. It depends on a lot of things, but there is a monthly stipend you get, but it is not a ton of money. And you are expected to use it for things like food, clothing, the utilities that you're going to use just by having children in your home. My husband did the math once, and I think it worked out to like a couple cents an hour that you make having a foster child in your home. So it really It's not a lot of money, and you're not going to make money if you're foster parenting right. In fact, we tend to spend more money than the monthly stipend on our foster child, because not only do we enjoy getting clothes and shoes and toys for him, but we're getting educational supplies, workbooks. We're taking him places so that he can have experiences like the aquarium, and we went to an open farm day, and we went to a touch a truck event, and other events like that, to be able to provide them experiences that we would provide biological children if we had them. We treat our foster placements as if they are our own. And so we give them everything that we can. And most months that works out to being more than the stipend provides. And that's fine, because this is what we signed up for. This is what we chose to do, and we can afford it. So it's fine. But if you're foster parenting right, you're not going to make any money as a foster parent. And that is just a very old stereotype that it's just not true. Now, I can imagine that in the past, I have heard stories of people who lived on big farms, would become foster parents, take in a whole ton of kids, use them as farm hands or ranch hands, and not pay them for the work that they were doing around the farm or the ranch or whatever. And then they would just pocket the money. But that is an old stereotype. I don't know of anybody who does that in today's day and age. And I don't know of any agency that would license people who were living that way or who wanted to foster parent because of that. Agencies do a very thorough background check on foster parents, and you have to do training, you have to have references, you have to go through state and federal background checks. You have a lot of things that you have to go through. You have to have driver's checks. You have to prove your finances so that you can prove that you're not going to be depending on the child's monthly stipend for your family to live month to month. So there's a lot of checks and balances that have really weeded out people who were coming into foster care for the wrong reasons. I'm not saying that bad foster parents don't exist, because of course there's bad people in every corner of the world. And so I'm sure there are foster parents that aren't great or got into it for the wrong reasons. But I think that they are much fewer and further between. Nowadays, the agencies do a really good job of vetting out people who are not right for the position and who are not doing it for the right reasons. So you really can't make money as a foster parent, especially if you're doing it right. It just doesn't happen. The next one is that foster parents are the bad guys. I have heard this one, and I know there are some people who think this, that it's foster parents who are keeping kids away from their families. I know that in a lot of situations, biological parents can have a really hard time with how they view foster parents, because their children were taken from them and placed with these other people. And I understand that, but it's not foster parents' fault that children are in foster care. Foster parents have no say whether or not a child is taken into foster care, and they have no say whether or not a child stays in foster care. They also have no say on whether or not a child goes to a kinship member or stays in their home. Foster parents have no say in any of that. So children come into foster care for reasons of abuse, neglect, or abandonment. Typically, there's a couple other little things like parent incarceration and parental drug use, which tends to lead to abuse or neglect. But I digress. There's a whole video that I have on that. I'll link it below, about what is foster care and what are reasons that children come into foster care. It'll be linked in the description below if you're interested in learning more about that. But foster parents don't have any say whether children come into foster care or not. In fact, foster parents often don't know anything about these children. They don't know who these children are. Of course, we know that children exist in these situations, but we don't know the specifics of who the children are. And so we're just normal people living our normal lives, and we get a phone call from a social worker asking if we're willing to accept a placement. Usually they don't provide much information. You typically can get age and gender. Occasionally you can get race. Occasionally you can get what they're coming in to care for. But that's really about it. And foster parents have to decide with what little information they know whether or not that child's going to be a good fit for their family and whether they can take on that placement. And then once a placement's in your home, foster parents are responsible for the daily care of the child, but foster parents have no say on what's happening with the case. So the birth parents are given a plan to work, and they are given assistance by social services to help in any way that they can to help the parents work the plan and to work towards reunification. Reunification is almost always the primary goal. There are a few very rare instances where it's just not ever going to be safe for that child to go home. And so in those cases, reunification just can't happen safely. But in most every case, reunification is the primary goal. And foster parents are expected to support reunification and do whatever they can with shared parenting with the biological parents to be able to support that child going home if and when it's safe to do so. So foster parents don't have a say in whether or not the birth parents work their plan. And if birth parents do work their plan, but foster parents still sometimes don't feel like it's the best situation for that child to go home to, foster parents can say, hey, I don't want this child to go home, and the court can still decide to send the child home. So foster parents have no say whether a child comes into care, whether a child stays in care, whether a child stays in their home versus going to a kinship member, which is a family member of the biological parents. And because of that, foster parents really can't be the bad guys. Like, yes, foster parents can voice their concerns to the social worker or the guardian ad litem, but the foster parent's voice really doesn't hold much or any weight in court. So foster parents are not the bad guys. We're not here to take people's kids away from them. In fact, most of us know, it was taught to us in training, that reunification is the primary goal. We know that. We are expected to be on board with that until the courts decide otherwise. So it is up to the birth parents, social services, the judge. They're the ones who together decide whether or not the parent's working the plan and what the parent's plan is and whether or not the child can safely return home or if another avenue for permanency needs to be found. So foster parents are really not the bad guys. We really have no say. We're just here to love on and protect and help out with these kiddos any way that we can. And the last myth about foster parenting that I want to address is that I could never love a child and then say goodbye to them. That's a myth. A lot of people are afraid of becoming foster parents because they're afraid of getting attached. And while I understand that, because we do get attached to these kids and it is really hard for us to have to say goodbye to them, that is the goal of foster parenting. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Attachment is not a side effect of foster parenting. It is the goal. These children have been through abuse and neglect, and what they need more than anything to help heal those things is attachment to a safe, stable adult. So you are expected to get attached to these children, and if you're not getting attached to them, you're doing it wrong. How can you not get attached to a child in your home? But you can say goodbye to them. And yeah, it's hard, and foster parents cry and foster parents feel the heartbreak, but we are stable adults. We know how to handle heartbreak. We've been through it. And wouldn't you rather your heart break so that theirs can feel a little bit of healing and love? So I know it's hard, and I know foster parenting isn't for everyone, but attachment is the goal. And so many foster parents get attached and then have their heart broken when they have to say goodbye. But that's what foster care is. It's loving these children and standing in the gap while they're in a really vulnerable and tough situation. And many of them do get reunified to their parents. Many of them do get to go to kinship members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, older siblings, you know, teachers, even other close family friends. And foster parents do have to say goodbye, and that's really hard. In some situations, reunification with parents is not possible. There are no safe, stable kinship members identified, and then foster parents can adopt the children. But the large majority of children that come into your home as a foster parent are not going to stay with you forever. They are going to have a temporary stay in your life. And yes, it's going to hurt, but you can have some healing and peace knowing that you have helped heal their heart a little bit. So maybe my heart breaks a little bit, but I know that I've healed theirs. And so it is really a myth that you can't love a child and then say goodbye, because there would be no foster parents if that was impossible. Foster parents do love children and then say goodbye all the time, and we are all still fostering and still loving children that need it. So that's all the myths, misconceptions, and stereotypes that I have for now about foster parents and foster parenting. I hope you all really enjoyed hearing some of these. And if you're interested in learning about the myths, misconceptions, and stereotypes about children in foster care, then please remember to subscribe to my channel below, hit that post notification bell, select all for your notifications so that you don't miss when I post part 2 of this video, and so you can join my growing cyber family here on YouTube. As always, friends, please go out, continue to shine your light into the world.
I surround my soul with the positivity. That's why I don't worry about the things that I don't see. Yeah. These days I don't worry about much. I think we should have some more fun. I still dream about the days when we were young. I'll take a hit and still finish in one. Yeah.